I'm a busy mom who loves to bake, and today I'm teaching you how to make easy homemade puff pastry. Puff pastry from the freezer section is handy, sure, but you know what is actually easy and impressive? Homemade puff pastry. And you can make it ahead of time and freeze it too. I know, it sounds super complicated, but something that I learned from a friend of mine who is a trained pastry chef is that puff pastry actually isn't hard to make at all. It just takes a lot of butter.
Wow. Butter is life.
So before we begin, you're going to want to remember the number 3.
I've just never seen you wink in my whole life, but if you feel like that's natural.
And hang around till the end for an easy recipe that you can save for later. The 3 simple ingredients you need are flour, butter, and water. Yes, that's really it. Step 1, measure your flour into a bowl. For this recipe, we need 3 cups of flour. Step 2, chop up butter and mix with a pastry blender. You need 3 cups of butter. You heard me right, 3 cups. It's a lot of butter. It should be super cold straight from the fridge, and you'll want to chop it all up into little pieces to make it easier to mix in. A little tip here is that you can also put the butter in the freezer an hour or so ahead of time to get it super cold. I've said it before and I'll say it again, the pastry blender is my favorite kitchen tool that is very little known, and we're gonna use it here now to just get the butter incorporated into the flour. It's a lot of butter. You might even want to use your hands to get it sort of mixed up first, and then we'll just use the pastry blender to break. We'll just use the pastry blender to break the chunks a little bit smaller. Another trick is to use a cheese grater to get the cold butter into small pieces. Step 3, mix in ice cold water and bring the dough together. You want ice cold water, so I usually put ice cubes in my measuring cup and then measure the water out of that. You need to add 3/4 of a cup of water, but I like to add it 3 tablespoons at a time, 9 total. You may need a little more or a little less, so just work with the dough until it all comes together. There really is a lot of moisture in the butter, so be patient. Step 4, roll out and make a tri-fold with your dough. See, I told you 3 was going to show up a lot. Roll out a rectangle. Can you pull my hair out of my face, please? Because my hands are covered in flour. Like, tuck it behind my ear. There we go. And the other side. Thank you. And then fold the dough just like you would a letter into 3 panels. And then
You're gonna mail it to my belly.
That's a terrible joke.
Thank you.
We're going to repeat this rolling and folding a second time right away so that all the edges are neat. Step 5, wrap in plastic wrap and chill in the fridge for 30 minutes to an hour. Whenever I have to put something to rise or let it chill, I usually tell my kids it's taking a nap. So we're gonna let the dough take a nap so that it rests, and then they're not too sad about having to wait. Ooh, came off in one smooth swipe. That doesn't happen every day, folks. This recipe really isn't difficult. It just requires a little patience and forethought. I suggest starting in the morning or even the day before you want to bake. To the fridge. Step 6, roll out the dough and tri-fold a 3rd time. All right, I took a break and did some school with my kids, and now we're ready for the next fold. It might take a minute or 2 for it to warm enough to be workable. As you're rolling it, you're gonna want to get it a little bit thinner than this. I would say this is like, what, 1/2 inch? Would you call it 1/2 inch?
Yeah.
So a little more thin, maybe
A 1/4 inch.
1/4 inch, so that you have room to fold it. All right, so here's another rectangle, and then we're gonna try fold again. All of this folding is creating layers with the butter, and that is what turns this into puff pastry. Wrap it up and stick it back in the fridge for another 30 to 60 minutes. Step 7, repeat step 6, roll and fold for the last 4th time. This extra time is so worth it for all of the flaky deliciousness you're going to enjoy at the end. At this point, you can wrap it up and save it for the next day, or stick it in the freezer for an even later time. Or if you're ready to bake now, let it chill again for 15 minutes if it's already too soft, and then get started. What are you doing?
He's trying to lick that edge.
Sometimes baking with kids is more mess than fun, but we do it. Puff pastry can be used on pie crusts, or as a sweet or savory pastries in all different shapes. Today, I decided to make some cinnamon twist pastries with my kids.
I I want a piece to eat.
as well as a jam and brie appetizer for the grown-ups, which is always a hit for the holidays.
This recipe is super easy and anyone can do it. Plus, it is so satisfying when you see all those fluffy little layers begin to puff up. And you can be proud that you made it yourself with just a few simple ingredients. So have fun baking and enjoy the process. As promised, here's the recipe.
This is a quick cinnamon roll recipe for busy moms or anyone who just doesn't have a lot of time to bake. Even if you've never baked before, or if you're running short on time, you can have soft, delicious cinnamon rolls in just 1 hour. It mixes up in 10 minutes, rises for 25 minutes, and bakes for 25 minutes.
You ready to bake?
Yeah.
The ingredients for the dough are milk, butter, white sugar, active dry yeast, salt, 1 egg, cinnamon, vanilla, and flour. The ingredients for the cinnamon sugar filling are butter, white sugar, brown sugar, cinnamon, and vanilla.
My kids love these cinnamon rolls, and since they always want to help, an easy no-fuss recipe is a must. I have so many memories of making cinnamon rolls with my grandma, and it's so fun to get to share that tradition with my family now. Stick around for a recipe that you can save for later. Okay, let's get started baking.
Yeah.
Step 1. Warm the milk and pour into a bowl. Warm 1 cup of milk in the microwave and pour into a mixing bowl or stand mixer. I love that this recipe can be done by hand and no mixer is required. But if you do have one and you want to use it, that's great too. Step 2. Melt the butter and add to the warm milk. Melt a 1/4 cup of butter and pour into the milk in the bowl. Step 3. Add sugar and yeast and let the yeast activate. Add a 1/4 cup of white sugar and stir it into the milk. Then sprinkle 1 tablespoon of active dry yeast, or 1 packet, on top and gently mix it so it dissolves. Wait 5 minutes while it activates. Step 4. Add in the egg, salt, and vanilla and mix well. Into the bowl, add 1 egg, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt.
Oh,
Holy crap!
It's
okay.
It's right over.
I like things salty. So be balanced with the sugar.
If you ever overmeasure or just accidentally dump like I did, you can always just scoop some out.
Scoop.
So I'm not exactly sure how much is in there now, but it's okay.
We'll never know.
This is no fuss baking, so we're fine.
And a 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla and mix it all together. Step 5. Add flour and mix. You need about 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour total, but I like to start with 2.5 and just slowly add in the rest until it is just the right texture.
This is obviously too sticky. This is just 2.5 cups. So I'll probably add another full cup here.
You want the dough to be soft, but not too sticky to handle or roll out. Start by mixing with a fork and then switch to using your hands when needed. Step 6. Knead the dough so that it's stretchy and soft.
So I'm going to teach you here just a quick, easy way to knead your dough. It's really just a lot of folding and turning. So if you take the palms of your hand and fold it over, sometimes you need a little extra flour. We're just going to be turning and folding. Turning and folding.
Can I lick the bowl?
Not yet.
Okay. Can I eat everything?
Step 7. Make the cinnamon sugar filling. In a bowl, combine a 1/2 cup of softened butter, a 1/2 cup of light brown sugar, a 1/2 cup of white sugar, 1.5 tablespoons of cinnamon, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Step 8. Roll out the dough into a rectangle and spread on the filling. Flour your surface again and roll out the dough until it is a 1/4 inch thin. Then spread on the filling with a spoon. Step 9. Roll up the dough and cut into slices. Gently roll the rectangle longwise to get a spiral in the dough. You will cut it into 12 slices.
So one option for cutting the cinnamon rolls so that they don't get squished flat is to use embroidery thread. I'm taking 1 single strand off of this embroidery thread.
An easy way to get 12 slices evenly is to start by cutting the roll in half. Then cut each of those in half again until you have 4 big segments. Then cut each of the 4 segments into 3 pieces. This should make 12 even cinnamon rolls. Place the rolls into a greased 9x13 pan. Step 10. Let rise for 25 minutes. In our house we call this letting the dough take a nap, because then my littles understand why we have to wait longer for the yummy treats we are making. The dough needs to rest, and I know we all wish we could take a nap now too. Once it's risen, you're ready to bake. Step 11. Bake at 350 degrees for 20 to 25 minutes. Keep an eye on them so that they don't get overbaked or underbaked.
Where did Mommy go?
She's in the kitchen.
Are you in charge today?
No.
Oh,
I'm little.
you're little? Oh, so you can't make the recipe?
Yeah.
Step 12. Optionally, you can make a simple cream cheese frosting to spread on the top while they are still warm. To be honest, sometimes I skip the frosting because there's already a lot of sugar in the rolls themselves. But if you love cream cheese frosting on your cinnamon rolls, here's an easy way to mix it up. Just mix together 8 ounces of softened cream cheese and half a cup of softened butter. Add in 1 teaspoon of vanilla and 2/3 cups of powdered sugar. If it's too thick, add 1 to 2 tablespoons of milk to thin it out. Spread on top while they're still warm, and it will melt into the cinnamon rolls.
Time to dig in. It's so pretty to eat.
Here's the recipe. Take a screenshot to save it for later. And thanks for watching.
Next up, I'll be sharing easy, no-chill cutout sugar cookies that are fast and fun. When it comes to holiday baking as a busy mom, I love an easy and fast recipe. These sugar cookies don't require extra time in the fridge, so they are perfect for when you want cutout cookies to decorate for holidays like Christmas and Valentine's Day. The ingredients you need are butter, powdered sugar, 1 egg, vanilla, all-purpose flour, salt, and baking powder.
You can make these cookies in 20 minutes or less, but it might depend on how much your little helpers are helping or not. Stick around to the end for a recipe that you can screenshot. Now let's get started baking.
Step 1. Blend together softened butter and powdered sugar. Soften 1 cup of butter in a large mixing bowl. Then mix in 1½ cups of powdered sugar. Step 2. Add the egg and vanilla and mix.
It does help to have a room temperature egg for this step because then it won't cause the butter to separate once it's mixed in. So if you're using your egg straight from the fridge, a little trick you can do is fill a bowl with hot water and just let it rest while you're working on your other ingredients, and then it should bring the temperature up just a little bit.
Once the egg is in, add 2 teaspoons of vanilla and mix everything together. Step 3. In a separate bowl, mix flour, salt, and baking powder. Measure out 2½ cups of flour, a ½ teaspoon of salt, and 2 teaspoons of baking powder and mix in a separate bowl. Then pour all of this into the egg and butter mixture and bring the dough together. If it is too sticky, you may need to add another ½ cup of flour, but I felt like it was just right this time. Step 4. Roll out the dough and cut into shapes. Roll out the dough to about 1/4 inch thick. Choose fun shapes and then cut them out. It can help to dip your cutters in flour so they don't stick. Step 5. Bake at 350 degrees for 7 to 9 minutes. Check the bottom of the cookies after 7 minutes to make sure they don't burn. If you plan to frost them, make sure to let them cool fully. Step 6. Decorate your cookies. You can make any kind of frosting, but a simple sugar cookie frosting is quick to mix up. For a small batch, I just combined in a bowl 2 cups of powdered sugar, 1/4 cup of butter, and a splash of vanilla, and 2 to 3 tablespoons of milk. Add the milk a little at a time until you have the desired thickness of your frosting.
My kids love to decorate with colorful frosting, but I've been learning about avoiding food dyes lately, and so we're gonna try out this package of food dye that has no artificial colors. It's made from plant sources, so we'll experiment today and see how some of the colors turn out. And I'll link to this product in the description.
Not the Christmas tree.
Are you decorating or looking?
Decorating too.
Oh!
These cookies turned out great, and I love how fast they can be made, which means that during the holidays you can whip up a batch and be ready to be decorating cookies in no time. Here's the recipe, so pause and take a screenshot, and thanks for watching.
If you loved these cookies but want something with a little spice, I know you'll love my all-time favorite ginger molasses cookies, which I'll be teaching you how to bake in the next video. Thanks for watching! If you're in the mood for something warm, spicy, and so delicious, today's the day we're making classic ginger molasses cookies. These are soft, chewy, and packed with that perfect balance of ginger, cinnamon, and molasses that make them irresistible.
Trying to break our oven?
No. As a busy mom, I love an easy and simple cookie, and this recipe is one that anyone can do. Stick around to the end for a recipe that you can save for later.
You'll need butter, dark molasses, 1 egg, brown sugar, all-purpose flour, baking soda, salt, cinnamon, ground ginger, and cloves. Step 1. Melt the butter and combine with molasses and brown sugar. Melt 3/4 cup of butter in a bowl and add a 1/3 cup of dark molasses and 1 cup of brown sugar packed well. Mix all of this together. Step 2. Add the egg and mix well.
I showed this in my last cookie video, but it's always helpful to have a room temperature egg. And a quick way to get it room temperature is to put it in some hot water and just let it sit while you're mixing up your other ingredients. This should bring it down from being so cold.
Mix in 1 egg and beat well. Originally, this recipe called for a mixer, but I think doing it by hand works just fine. Step 3. In a separate bowl, combine all the dry ingredients. To your bowl, add 2½ cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, 2 teaspoons of ground ginger, and ½ a teaspoon of ground cloves. Step 4. Add the dry ingredients to the wet ingredients. Mix all of this together well and then slowly add it to your other bowl.
So a little tip here to get your cookies at that perfect gooey texture is to not put too much flour or too little flour. And so as you are dumping and pouring, you want to be careful not to dump too much right at the beginning. I don't even always use all of the flour mixture. So I'll show you as I do it the texture you're looking for, because if it's too thick, then they're gonna stay cakey and dry. And if there's not enough flour, then they get really thin and they'll spread. And so we're gonna try to get right in the middle for the texture of cookies we're looking for. So I think that this is pretty close. You can tell that it's starting to get thick. It's still very sticky, but it is starting to thicken up. I might add just another sprinkle of this. Maybe 2.
What time?
I'm gonna just test and see, can I get it into a ball? It's gonna be very sticky, but you can still get it into a ball. I might add a little bit more flour here.
Step 5. Roll out tablespoon-sized cookies and place on a pan.
If you want your cookies to be super uniform, you could use a scoop like this, but honestly, just using your hands and rolling it into a ball works great too.
Step 6. Bake at 325 degrees for 9 to 11 minutes. Take note, this is a lower temperature than usual for other baked goods. I was experimenting a little bit today to find the sweet spot to get them gooey, and I think 9 minutes was perfect.
So I'm gonna check them. They could be ready, but they might need a few more minutes. I like my cookies really soft, so I'm gonna go ahead and take these out.
Trying to break our oven?
No, that helps them flatten and they turn out more gooey.
Some secret trick going on here.
Can't pick this up off the ground. I think that's good. If you like them not so gooey in the middle, you could put them in for 2 more minutes. But I think as they set up, they'll be perfect.
And of course, enjoy them with your family and a glass of milk.
So I actually did my second batch, only 9 minutes. And I feel like that is like the perfect gooey texture.
Even more gooey.
9 minutes. So I was experimenting a little bit today, and you can too. You can figure out which way you like to make it.
Each week as a part of our homeschool, we like to have a poetry tea time, and these cookies were a perfect sweet treat to enjoy along with our tea. I think one of the best things about baking is being able to create memories with my family, both in the kitchen and around the table.
Pause here for the recipe.
Dad, those cookies are so good. Dad can eat all the
I'm gonna
cookies.
eat all the cookies. Oh no. None for me?
No, Mom, I'm gonna eat all the cookies. And milk.
Today, I'm teaching you how to make an easy pumpkin pie. I believe baking should be easy and accessible, even for busy moms like me.
I'll give you guys a bite of crust, but you need to keep your fingers out of stuff.
So I'm going to walk you step by step through this simple process. Now I know the steps to mix everything together are pretty straightforward. And while I love baking, even I find pumpkin pie to be a little bit intimidating. It can be hard to get the center fully cooked without over baking the whole thing or burning the crust.
I say it's a terrible nuisance and annoying and hard to do. But you don't want to burn crust, right?
So make sure to hang around to the end because I'll give you 3 tips and tricks on how to know if your pie is set well and not too jiggly in the middle. I'll also have a recipe to screenshot for you. Ideally, you want to start with a homemade pie crust, and I teach you how to make one in 3 minutes. Okay, let's dive in.
Yeah.
Your ingredients are sugar, pumpkin pie spice, salt, eggs, evaporated milk, and pumpkin puree. I've made pumpkin pie before with actual pumpkins, baking and pureeing it myself, but that was a lot of work. So using pumpkin puree from a can is totally fine here. Just be careful not to cut your finger.
Pro tip. Careful when opening the cans.
Step 1. Mix together pumpkin, milk, and eggs. Scoop into your bowl 1 15-ounce can of pumpkin puree. Then pour in 1 12-ounce can of evaporated milk and 2 eggs. Mix all of this together well, making sure that the eggs are fully beaten in. Step 2. Add in your sugar and spices and mix well in a separate bowl. Measure 3/4 cups of sugar and add a ½ teaspoon of salt and 2 tablespoons of pumpkin pie spice, which has cinnamon, ginger, cloves, allspice, and nutmeg in it. Add all of this to the pumpkin mixture. Step 3. Pour into pie crust. Pour your beautiful creamy mixture into the pie crust. Step 4. Bake carefully. Here's a couple of techniques I learned to get the middle fully cooked without burning the crust.
Here's why pumpkin pie is intimidating. It is hard to get it baked all the way through in the middle without burning the crust. So we'll see. We can test it out and try out together. Does this actually work? Does it help us figure out when our pie is done?
The first is to cover the crust with foil. It's not easy, but does protect those edges from overbaking.
I hate this.
Look at that, filming.
Don't squish
Wait,
the
that's the
crust.
bad side of my hair. The other hand.
You have to gently cover it without squishing the crust.
Oh, I'm doing it gently.
I don't know how to turn the camera off. Is there a button to push?
No, there's no buttons. It's a Tesla.
It's like building a spaceship. Oh, and it goes off.
Dude, nailed that.
The second is to bake it at 2 different temperatures. First, you bake it at 425 for 15 minutes. This helps it all get initially set up. Then bake it for the remaining time at 350 degrees for around 40 to 50 minutes. And here's 3 helpful tips on how to tell if your pumpkin pie is set. The first one is, I learned that there's an old saying that you want the center of your pie to jiggle like jello, not wiggle like a wave. Second, you want to pay attention to the change in color. After about an hour of baking, it should be 1 to 2 shades darker than when you started. You can take a picture and that will help you compare. Third, use a toothpick to check the center. It should come out mostly clean. Looks mostly clean. I think I'm gonna call it. That was exactly 1 hour. Growing up, I never really liked pumpkin pie. Don't worry, that's changed now. But it wasn't until I was engaged and I learned that my now husband really loved pumpkin pie that I ever tried baking it for the first time. So, with very little experience of baking pumpkin pie over the years, I was not sure about making this pumpkin pie. I hate making pumpkin
I'll do
pie.
this part.
But with these tips and tricks, I really am pleased with how it turned out. As promised, here's the screenshot of the recipe.
Oh, and do we need to say step 5? Devour and enjoy. Have you ever wished you could bake your own delicious pie crusts but felt like the process was overwhelming and insanely time-consuming? Store-bought pie crusts can seem like an easy hack, But there's nothing like the quality and taste of a real homemade pie crust. Even if you've never made your own crust before, I want to encourage you that with this easy recipe, you really can do it, and without hardly any extra time added.
So today, I'm going to teach you how I make my 3-minute, 3-ingredient pie crust recipe. And stick around till the end and I'll give you a screenshot of the recipe. And as a bonus, I will be sharing my favorite little-known kitchen tool that I think everyone should have, especially for pie crust. So first, let's talk about the 3 simple ingredients that you are going to need. All-purpose flour. I use organic, but I don't always, and so you can use whatever you have on hand. Butter is your other ingredient. I use salted. Some people are kind of finicky about salted versus unsalted, but honestly, whatever you choose, whatever's in your fridge is going to be great. You're not going to ruin this recipe. And milk. Some people like to use water in their pie crusts. My grandma and my mom have always used milk, and so that's what I use, and trust me, it is delicious.
For this recipe, we'll be making a top and bottom pie crust, like what you might use for a standard size circular apple pie. I also use this to make one long pie crust to top my chicken pot pie in like a 9x13 pan. Step 1 is to measure 2 cups of flour into your bowl. In my kitchen, it is low pressure baking, so don't get super hung up on weighing or measuring to the tiniest degree. Just scoop your flour and shake it a little so it's not compact and so it's even on the top. You might be thinking, but what if I put too much in and then I ruin the whole batch? Don't worry. If it's too dry at the end, you can always add more milk. For step 2, you will add in a 1/2 cup of butter, and here's the secret for really flaky crusts. You want your butter to be cold straight from the fridge. Think about all the layers of a croissant for a second. All of those layers are made by butter, and in a pie crust, it is a similar thing happening. I like to chop my butter up with a sharp knife because that is going to make it easier to incorporate into the flour.
All right, here is where my favorite kitchen tool comes in, the pastry blender. I would give up a lot of other kitchen items like measuring cups before I gave up this because it is so handy for making things like biscuits or pie crusts. This one is by Good Cook. You can find it for less than $10 on Amazon. I will link it in the description below. So here we are. We're going to use this for our pie crust recipe today. But never fear, even if you only had your hands or a fork, you can still easily make this pie crust. This is just helpful for cutting the butter and getting it all incorporated.
The pastry blender just helps us break the butter into smaller pieces and incorporate it into the flour. If you are using a fork, just mash and chop and stir. You can even use your hands. You want varying sizes of butter, nothing too huge, but also not so small that you can barely see it anymore. I'd say pea size is a good comparison. Step 3, add a 1/2 cup of milk and start mixing. It will seem dry at first, but as your butter softens, it will add more moisture and start to come together. Don't be afraid to get messy. You'll need to use your hands to get it all into a ball. If it's too dry and crumbly at this point, add a sprinkle more of milk and keep working it. That's it! Beautiful and easy pie crust, ready to go on whatever you're making. If I'm using a top and bottom crust, I'll just split it in half and roll it out into circles. My kids are always asking for a lick of dough, so when I cut off the extra scraps around the edges, there's usually little hands waiting for a taste. So as promised, here's the recipe, so pause the video now to screenshot and save for later. So stay tuned for my next video making an easy homemade apple pie. I'll also be sharing about a fun kitchen tool that makes it quick and stress-free. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
If you're looking for a quick and easy apple pie recipe without compromising the quality, you're in the right place. Today I'm sharing how to make a homemade apple pie with no measuring required.
If you're a busy mom with little helpers around, you're going to love this fast, no-measure method to baking an apple pie. Sometimes it's nice to be precise, but a lot of times it's way more fun to measure with your heart.
What I wanted.
And don't worry, I encourage lots of taste testing along the way.
Hey.
I whipped up this apple pie with the help of my 2 toddlers, and while it was not without its messes,
Isaiah, can you give me a LeBron James?
it was super simple. There's also a super easy and fun tool for peeling and coring apples that I want to make sure you know about. It really speeds up the process. You're going to want to start with a homemade pie crust. The rest of the ingredients you will need are apples, vanilla, nutmeg, cinnamon, sugar, and lemon juice. You can use any apples of your choosing, but in my opinion, the best apple pies are made with Granny Smith apples. They're tart and firm, which means when they bake down, they're not going to turn into complete mush. We recently picked apples with some friends, and they showed us this awesome tool for peeling, coring, and slicing the apples super quickly. And then I remembered my parents had one, so we borrowed their classic old version. My kids love to help, and this is their absolute favorite part.
This apple peeler and corer and slicer is super handy, and it makes the whole process really quick. You can find it on Amazon, and I will link it in the description below. Here's a quick rundown of the steps you're going to follow.
Step 1. Slice, core, and peel the apples. We used about 8 medium-sized Granny Smiths. Step 2. Juice half a lemon and add that to your apples if you enjoy an extra tart flavor. Step 3. Then dump in a generous amount of sugar and cinnamon and sprinkle in a little bit of nutmeg to add a unique warm flavor. Step 4. Add a dash of vanilla and a dash of salt. We are building the flavors and looking for balance with each of these ingredients, so you have to taste along the way to see what's missing.
And a little more cinnamon.
Of course, I keep my professional taste testers nearby to help out. Step 5. The next crucial step is to add a handful of flour. You will notice as you start mixing that the apples begin to release their juice, and you want to thicken that now before it bakes. I probably used around 1/4 cup of flour here, but again, you can feel it out. If it looks too juicy, add a little more flour. Step 6. Then all that's left is to spread your apple mixture into the pie crust and cover with the top pie crust. I crimped the edges like this, then cut some holes in the top for ventilation. My mom always made this beautiful wheat head design because she grew up on a farm in western Kansas. I like to follow along in the tradition. I bake this pie at 350 degrees for about 45 minutes, but I always recommend setting for about 35 and checking because you don't want to burn your pie crust. You can also poke a fork in to see if the apples have softened or not.
We all enjoyed this easy homemade apple pie, and I know you will too. I believe baking should be accessible and simple, no matter how busy your life might be. So I love sharing recipes that are quick and easy to make. Now, I could give you an exact prescription on how to make this apple pie, but I want to challenge you to experiment and find out what you really like. Do you like things extra sour? You might want to add more lemon juice. Or do you prefer it sweet? You can add more sugar. For some people, there's no such thing as too much cinnamon. So just dump and enjoy and keep tasting along the way. You get to decide how this pie turns out. So get brave and start measuring with your heart and have fun.